Hello, welcome to Unical Academy's CISSP Simple Training Series. Now we are entering to Domain 2. Domain 2 is relatively simple, easy, and high probability of scoring 100%. So this majorly covers Chapter 5 of Official Study Guide as well as Chapter 16. This lesson 5 I am splitting into two parts. This is part A now I am covering. In next session I will be covering part B. Part A will be focusing only these two areas: information and asset classification and asset handling requirements, how the assets and the data need to be handled. Assets and information classification. Managing the data lifecycle refers to protecting it from the cradle to the grave, simply starting from where the data is coming until data is no longer used where you distract. That's what the data life cycle that everybody should understand. What do you mean by sensitivity of the data? What exactly is the sensitivity of the data, and how do you classify the data based on the sensitivity and importance? Based on that classification, what sort of marking you need to put across which is visible for the users who are using the data, and the data in three states: during the storage, during the transition, while in usage, and what sort of compliance requirements you need to follow throughout the life cycle, and what control can be in place are covered in this section: assets and information classification. First, defining sensitive data. Please understand, when you say sensitivity, either it could be for individuals or it could be for an organization. When you are talking about sensitivity of the data from the individual perspective, this can be personally identifiable information or protected health information. When you are talking for an organization, proprietary data, that refers to any data that helps an organization maintain its competitive advantage, maybe trade secret, maybe certain patent. So all these actually fall under organization sensitive information, whereas PII, personally identifiable information, that could be anything: somebody's medical records, educational information, financials, or employment information. That is PII. Whereas protected health information is any health related information that can be related to a specific person. In the United States, it is majorly covered under HIPAA Act, Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, that mandates how the PHI should be protected. Recently, HIPAA Act is enhanced further with BAA, also clearly covered in High-Tech Act. This is what we already studied in detail in our lesson number 4. After identifying the sensitivity, then the data needs to be classified. For government agencies, at least in the United States, the 4 classifications: top secret, exceptionally grave damage to the national security, that's called top secret. Secret, the serious damage it may be causing to the national security. Confidential, may cause certain impact, cause damage. Unclassified, when you say unclassified, need not be in public domain. What the government definition or understanding that clearly says is any unclassified information that any authorized individual or citizen of the United States can get, under Freedom of Information Act, FOIA. Under this you can go it. So simply what you are saying, first understand the sensitivity attached and then classify appropriately. This is the left side part, the government classification that we already covered. For the corporates, the non-government agencies, when you say classification, yeah, class 0, this is unclassified for government, and you say public for the private institutions or non-government organizations. What is confidential? Something that may cause potential damage but may not be very severe is confidential for government. Here you are calling that as sensitive information as far as private organizations concerned. Secret, it leads to cause serious damage to the national security, cause severe damage to the company interest. Top secret is extreme damage. Here it could be very extremely vital information. It could be some patent or the marketing strategy or some investment planning, whatever you're talking. So for example, one example is the damage of hacking that happened to Sony company when hundreds of terabytes of data was hacked, including certain unreleased movies. That's what we mean by confidential data. Whereas private is concerned, we are expecting, the users are expecting this information should be within the authorized premises of the organization, should not be going out. So it could be, you can consider the PHI information what healthcare provider or insurance company maintains, or PII information what a bank or school maintains, can be the examples that we can consider. What can be the possible example for the sensitivity? In this context, a data breach could be certain damage to the mission. It could be certain product launch brochure, or certain specifications, or certain design pattern. So anything that go out may be causing certain impact can be considered sensitive. Public is okay, that is accessible maybe on their website, or maybe through brochures, or maybe through any other information. That's what classified. So simply, what is confidential, that stays at level 1, becomes the topmost in private agencies. That's what should be clearly understood. So this is the one which may be confusing, and the dire consequences, extremely damaging, grave implications. These are the adjectives that need to be observed while talking about this. These are not at all classified. It's okay to have. Here it is, you need to ask under the act. Here it can be really directly available. That's the only subtle difference between these two. But level 0, 1, 2, 3 remains same. Now let us go. The compliance, the data states in what conditions we need to have. What do you mean by understanding data states, and what should be the compliance requirements of each, that we will be covering. So when you say data can be only in 3 states, either it is stored, or it may be in transition from client to server, or server to client in internet environment, or from within the network cables or firewalls, or either through wired or wireless within an intranet environment. So that's what you mean by transit. And data is used is actually sitting or being accessed from the memory. So in these two cases, potentially you can encrypt to safeguard. However, in 99% of the applications, while in use, data won't be encrypted. Yeah, there is a possibility of encrypting, but extreme overheads inhibit the encryption option while in use. That's what you need to remember. So the best way for two states is encryption. So the common question, either in rest you encrypt, during transition you encrypt. That's what you need to remember. Okay, so another point, in some cases it is possible to encrypt using homomorphic encryption. That's the term what you need to remember. Homomorphic encryption is a possibility even while system is accessing from RAM, but maintenance is a problem, extremely costly. That's the reason it is rarely used. Summary, for all these, encryption is the only option what we are suggesting in three states to really protect. So that's the key point what we need to observe for these three states. Then comes what could be the implications or the compliance requirement for the data. Every organization has a responsibility to learn what legal requirements are required. These we clearly covered in our last lesson, lesson 4. What are the laws, regulations and the compliance requirements that expect people to protect the data, destroy the data, and also retain the data during the retention period. Few times after no longer required, please destroy. From legal perspective, for compliance perspective, for audit perspective, retain as long as it is required. In either of the cases, until it is distracted or retained or in use, onus lies on the users and the involved party to protect the data. So that is the compliance requirement. Few organizations really create the compliance officers also. Compliance officers are exclusively meant to safeguard the data protection for which the company, that organization is responsible. Okay, so then let's go. What do you mean by security controls? We understood data needs to be, sensitivity need to be understood, then classify, then protect. Okay, now let us understand what sort of security controls can actually ensure this particular protection. After defining data and asset classifications, you must be in a position to define the security requirements and identify security controls and implement those. That's what it talks about. What are required, what are not required. Based on the classification, whether it is confidential, private, sensitive, public, whatever we are talking about for the organizations. Similarly, whatever is top secret, secret, confidential, unclassified, based on that, the different security controls should be coming into place. And similarly, email retention is also another critical activity. Generally, most of the organizations delete the emails that is no longer used after 90 days, particularly the client communication. That is also you need to remember. Better is minimize the data breach. That should be the goal that we are talking. This brings us to end of the first section that we would like to we covered here. Now we are going into the second section, that is handling requirements of data and asset security. What we will be going to cover in this section: data maintenance. We are expected to maintain, ensure whatever you are maintaining won't be lost. It should be prevented by ensuring the proper marking, handling the way it is supposed to be handled, collect the bare minimum what is really required, don't collect anything more than what you want, store it appropriately, destruct when no longer it is required, retain as long as it is required. That is what we will be briefly covering in this section. Okay, data maintenance. What do you mean by data maintenance? How are we maintaining? Data maintenance refers to ongoing efforts to organize and care for data throughout its lifetime. One network processes unclassified data. Another network may be processing the classified data. How do you understand and how do you take care? How do you maintain in day-to-day business operations is simply caring the data is what the data maintenance throughout the lifetime until it is completely destructed. That's what you need to understand as the key essence of this particular aspect. Then the next comes, how do you prevent data loss? First, detect the potential data loss that may be happening or likely to happen and block that being happening. For example, data loss prevention DLP systems attempt to detect and block data exfiltration attempts. If somebody is unauthorized going out of the data either through the network or from end devices, can be prevented or must be prevented by using right DLP tools. So how does it work? It is simply based on the pattern matching DLP system. You see something can go wrong. For example, social security number, if it is written in certain format of XXX, XX and XXXX, if you are seeing this pattern, that DLP automatically tries to protect. That's what we are talking. There are two types of DLPs that CISSP expects an individual to know. One is the network based DLP, another is endpoint based DLP. Network based DLP, another is endpoint based DLP. A network based DLP scans all outgoing data looking for specific data. It keeps on monitoring. If it sees a pattern, then it prevents. Whereas endpoint, that actually like Zscaler and others that sit on the laptop, an endpoint based DLP can scan files stored on a system as well as files being sent out or coming in. So that's what it does. Something going for printout also can be detected by endpoint based DLP. DLP systems typically can perform deep level examination based on the sensitivity of the asset, the laptop or the printer or that is being used, and based on the sensitivity and importance of the data that being stored or that being used by that particular system or network. Based on that, this entire DLP mechanism actually comes into picture. Another point, what do you mean by marking? Marking sensitive information ensures that users can easily identify the classification levels of any data. Let it be visible enough with a label or with some sort of marking, whether it is a top secret or it is completely unclassified. Based on that, every user who is using that particular data or that particular device can take appropriate action. Marking can be anything. It could be digital marks or labels. A simple method is classification as header or footer in a Word document or in Excel, that it itself says whether this document that I am emailing, can it go outside of my office or not, based on the classification that automatically appears at the header and footer that may be prompting me or alerting me while I decide to send an email. So there is a provision to upgrade the sensitivity, but most of the times organizations desist in downgrading the sensitivity majorly from the administrative and legal requirements perspective. Now, what do you mean by data handling? Secure transportation of media throughout its lifetime, while in use, while saving, while transmitting. That's what you mean by data handling. The next aspect is data collection. What do you mean by data collection is, what is the minimum data that you want to have? For example, if if an e-commerce company has to collect the credit card information or prefers to just pass on the credit card information, the best is pass on. Then no obligation for you to safeguard that credit card information, because it is anyway no value. The merchandise and the previous history and the communication, the transaction amount, those are required, but not the credit card information. That is handled by the specific financial institution. So similarly, once it is handled and located, the two other terms, connected terms, it is not directly connected, but where is your backup and where is your core data? That is a location, and at the same time, how are you actually storing it? This is also connected. So all these should be looked as one umbrella set. How do I handle, and whatever I'm decided or determined to handle properly, only that needs to be collected. Whatever I'm collecting, where do I locate, where is my storage location, and how meaningfully I'm storing my sensitive data, so that no data theft happens. I'm taking enough precautions to prevent losses due to theft. When you are saying prevention, remember it is digital prevention as well as the physical or environmental safeguards. Also, maybe the HVAC, what is the temperature, humidity, and everything you are maintaining, the fire protection facilities, those also should be taken into consideration. So first we talked about data maintenance, prevention, marking, and then the handling, collection, location, and after that, now let us talk about data destruction, remnants management, and various methods of data destruction. If not, simple rule, if you are not using, please destroy. How do you destroy? It all depends on your classification that you are using. If something is not that important, you need not damage a physical device or the magnetic team. Simply erase and reuse. If it is a bit critical, opt for clearing. Clearing is nothing but it is simple deletion, as you know, the standard deletion command applicable in Windows or Mac. Clearing is overwrite with certain junk data or maybe with zeros or ones. Purging is nothing but clearing, but doing multi times. Keep on, as long as your requirements dictate, you keep repeat the clearing process. That is what is purging. Degaussing is not applicable. Yeah, this could be a potential pointer in a question. Degaussing is not applicable for semiconductor. It is not applicable for any SSDs. These are applicable only for magnetic media. So erasing, clearing, purging, degaussing, destruction. What are the methods and when do I use each method? The best and the safest is destruction. If a question really talks about the best way to safeguard the data or which sanitization method is better, destruction. What is the least safe? Erasing, because the modern tools may enable somebody to undelete the data and read the previous data. That's what you need to understand under data destruction. Okay, after destruction, certain legal compliance requirements expect well-defined data or record retention policy. Under that, data needs to be retained. If a breach happens, data breach happens, you have to safeguard the records for any audit or for any lawsuit or for any inquiry. That's what we mean by retention. Simple. Similarly, health information, while safeguarding, a physician office has an obligation to retain the data as far as HIPAA guidelines are saying. Same goes for the PI also. So you have to retain credit history or certain past payments, everything need to be retained. That's what we mean by retention. So the critical term as far as retention is concerned, what you need to understand, majorly these are applicable for assets. Of course, even for the assets, when I say asset could be software as well as hardware or maybe any network device. End of life, when you say end of life, the vendor say this product is no longer implemented as a new product. So this version is completely withdrawn. The way Microsoft regularly updates says this particular MS Office 2013 is no longer supported after some time. So that's what you mean by end of life. End of life is not same as end of service. This particular version 1.1 of some product is no longer being sold is EOL. The one which we delivered way back in 2020 or 2015 can no longer be supported by us henceforth from effective by so and so date is called end of service line or end of support. So that's what we need to understand. We are completing this session. So in next we will be talking about the data protection methods and others again related to domain 2 asset security. So thank you for watching this video. The unicalacademy.com website is up and running now. All these slides, questionnaires and the practice tests are available for you to practice and to download the material. The forum and blog for the communication is on the way, should be ready by the time we are into lesson 6 or lesson 7. Thank you.